The shocking truth about compounding. Why the rich get richer after $100,000. Why do the wealthy seem to pull away so much faster once they cross a certain number? It almost looks unfair. You're saving, investing, grinding, and somehow they just keep accelerating ahead. The secret isn't luck. It isn't even special access. The real difference comes from something Albert Einstein once called the eighth wonder of the world. It's called compounding. But here's the twist. Compounding doesn't actually feel powerful when you're just starting. In fact, it feels frustratingly slow. The real magic doesn't reveal itself until you cross a hidden threshold. And for most people, that threshold sits right around $100,000. That's the tipping point where the wealth curve suddenly bends and the wealthy begin to pull away. Think about this. Let's say you manage to save and invest $10,000. That's a huge accomplishment on its own. But at an average return of 7%, you'll earn about $700 in the first year. $700 isn't bad, but it's not life-changing either. It might cover a few bills or a month of groceries, but it doesn't feel like wealth. And that's why so many people give up. They invest, wait a few years, and then think, this isn't working fast enough. They cash out, chase riskier shortcuts, or lose patience. But here's the hidden truth. Compounding is designed to look unimpressive at first. It's a slow burn. The real firepower only shows up later when your base is large enough that growth itself becomes noticeable. That's why the first $100,000 is the hardest. Once you cross it, the math finally flips in your favor. At the same 7% return, $100,000 generates $7,000 in a year. That's no longer spare change, that's months of rent, a vacation, or serious reinvestment. For the first time, compounding starts to feel real. Warren Buffett often compares compounding to rolling a snowball down a hill. His advice? Start early or live long enough to let the snowball roll. Charlie Munger, his legendary business partner, put it bluntly. The first $100,000 is a bitch, but you've got to do it. I don't care what you have to do if it means walking everywhere and eating beans. Because after that, the momentum finally carries you. Even Buffett's own journey proves it. He didn't become a billionaire until well into his 50s. Today, over 90% of his net worth was earned after that age, not because he suddenly got smarter, but because compounding had decades to work its magic. And that's the exact point where the gap between wealthy and not yet wealthy starts to widen. This is what I call the compounding gap. At $200,000, 7% growth produces $14,000 in a year. At $500,000, that jumps to $35,000. At $1 million, it's $70,000. And here's the kicker. It's the same percentage return. Nothing changed except the size of the base. That's why wealth feels exponential. The higher you go, the faster it pulls away. Take Coca-Cola for example. If you had invested $1,000 in the stock in the early 1990s and simply held it, today that investment would be worth over $10,000, not including dividends. That's the snowball in action, slow, steady growth compounding into something huge. Or look at Lowe's, the home improvement giant. Over the past 3 decades, it's returned more than 20% annually. That means $1 invested then has grown to more than $300 today. Investors who held on weren't working harder than anyone else. Their money simply reached the part of the curve where it accelerated on its own. That's why the wealthy appear to be on a different playing field. They're not necessarily smarter, luckier, or even saving more. They've just crossed into the zone where compounding begins to roar. Meanwhile, everyone below that line is still grinding, walking on the treadmill while the wealthy glide forward. So why don't more people make it past this point? The problem isn't math, the problem is mindset. In the beginning, compounding feels like watching paint dry. That's when most people quit. They underestimate the power of consistency, they overspend, they get discouraged, or they chase shortcuts hoping for a quick win. It's the same reason viral savings challenges like the 100 envelope challenge on TikTok explode in popularity. The challenge is simple. Fill 100 envelopes with random amounts between $1 and $100. By the end, you've saved over $5,000. It works because it gamifies discipline. But the real challenge isn't filling envelopes, it's staying consistent for years, long after the novelty wears off. And that's the part most people fail at. They stop before compounding has the chance to reward them. But here's the encouraging part. Starting small doesn't mean you're locked out. Compounding rewards. Discipline even more than it rewards starting position. Imagine 2 people. Person A has $100,000 invested but never adds another dollar. Person B has only $10,000 but contributes $500 a month. Over time, person B eventually catches up. It doesn't happen overnight, but the math is undeniable. This is exactly what real people share online. One Reddit user put it perfectly. It took me 7 years to reach $100,000. Then it only took 2 years to reach $200,000. Then just 1 year to reach $300,000. Once you cross that tipping point, the acceleration is shocking. That's why discipline is the secret weapon. Even if you're behind, you can still win, if you're consistent long enough to let the math work. But once you do cross that six-figure line, a new trap emerges. Here's the danger almost nobody talks about. Once people hit 6 figures, they feel unstoppable. And that's when the temptation to gamble bigger kicks in. They start chasing risky investments, timing the market, or throwing money into hype-driven assets, believing it will catapult them to millions. The irony? That's often how they lose the base they worked so hard to build. Compounding doesn't require drama. It doesn't need flashy moves or lottery tickets. What it needs is time and protection. Buffett himself has said, "We don't have to be smarter than the rest, we have to be more disciplined than the rest." The wealthy don't hit home runs every year, they simply keep getting on base, over and over. That boring discipline is what lets compounding keep doing the heavy lifting. Here's where it gets crazy. At $500,000, compounding adds more in a single year than most people can save in a decade. At $1 million, it generates $70,000 annually, often more than someone's full-time job. That's why it feels like the wealthy are playing a different game, because at that level, they are. Look at Berkshire Hathaway. Since Buffett took over in 1965, its value per share has grown at about 20% per year. That means $100 invested back then would be worth over $4 million today. That's the snowball effect in its purest form, not a lottery, not a trick, just relentless compounding over time. And here's the good news. The curve doesn't belong only to the wealthy. The laws of compounding don't discriminate. Whether you're starting with $100, $1,000, or $10,000, the formula is the same. The challenge is staying consistent long enough to feel the shift. Every month you wait makes the climb longer. Every dollar you invest today gets extra years to grow. If you start now, stay disciplined, and protect your progress, the math will eventually tip in your favor. The wealthy pull away after $100,000 because that's when compounding stops whispering and starts to roar. But that roar is waiting for anyone willing to stay in the game long enough to hear it.